Well, hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio with me, Jo Moffat. Engage for Success is a not-for-profit movement. We're the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement. We're raising awareness and running events online and around the country, developing research, publishing case studies, and shining a light on great practice. These weekly radio shows are now streaming live on YouTube. Simply search Engage for Success Radio podcast to find your way there. Or you can listen to the full archive at engageforsuccess.org, where you can learn more about the movement and sign up for our weekly newsletter. So I'm Jo Moffat. I'm one of 3 regular hosts for Engage for Success Radio. And as with everyone who supports the movement, we are all volunteers with day jobs. Mine was that I founded and led Woodreed, a consultancy leveraging the creative and insight-led approach of the advertising world to engage employees inside organisations. I sold that last year to 7Cs, the culture consultancy, and I now work for them as a senior consultant. So it means I can still continue to support clients to create workplace cultures that make workplaces work for employees as well as shareholders and stakeholders. So today's radio show, which is unbelievably number 638 in our weekly series, is called The Cultural Imperative, a topic that then is clearly very close to my heart. And I'm delighted to welcome back as our guest to explore it, Maria Paviour, who has been a friend and supporter of Engage for Success for many, many years. So welcome back, Maria.
Thank you very much, Jo. I'm delighted to be here, and I have been for many years. Yes.
Yeah, I know it's been a long time, and we were talking before we came on air about how important this topic is and how it isn't going away. And I know for the next half hour we're going to be exploring some of the challenges that particularly leaders face in creating high-performing cultures. So we're going to be exploring what truly drives performance, what truly drives well-being, and financial success, because all of these things combine. So Maria is, as well as being a long-term supporter and friend of Engage for Success, is also a published author. Has got some fabulous titles to her books, which may well come up in the course of the next half hour. But we're going to be exploring in more depth for the rest of the show her imminent and latest book, which is called The Cultural Imperative, and that's really the topic for today. But before we get into that, Maria, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, where you've come from, why you do what you do, and what that is?
Yes, I will indeed. So yes, I'm an occupational psychologist by profession, and I've been involved because I studied biology as well as psychology. I've been very much involved in neuroscience, and my interest has always been in how can we create workforces that are sustainable, and where it's more than sustainable for me. It's what I'm really all about is how do we create meaningful and challenging workplaces, because I think work should be something we enjoy, because I love work. I would like everybody to. So, my background is really as a psychologist, but I've also been in business. I've run a number of companies, and I currently run the Optimism Consulting, which is really an organization that focuses on how you can get the best from your people, how you can get the best value from your people as an organization, and how people can get the best from themselves and enjoy their work. So in a nutshell, that's me. I hope that's
you. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so with you on that. What you're describing there, it absolutely chimes with my belief. It isn't an either or, is it? You don't have organizations and leadership and stakeholders don't have to pursue financial success to the detriment of the well-being, mental or physical, of their people. You can, if you do these things right, you can create an organization that is working for everybody. And that does deliver performance, does deliver financial success, but gives those people that are contributing to that positive well-being, positive financial security, and mental and physical health and engagement and motivation. And as you say, doing a job that they enjoying their work, meaningful work. And
Yes.
they're really, you know, this idea that it's one or the other and you can't have one without the other is just wrong. And I think, you know, you can get that balance right, can't you?
I think I would go even further, and I would say that the only way you can fulfill your potential as an organization is if you have your people fulfilling their potential. And
Yeah.
the only way they can fulfill their potential is if they are feeling healthy and happy at work.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems for me is that there's been such a focus on well-being that I actually think that that has been a mistake. And I think it has actually made the situation a lot worse rather than better.
Okay. Well, let's explore a little bit more what you mean by that, because you know, we do know, don't we, that the health and safety executive make it clear that it's not an option for organisations to choose to manage or not workplace stress. You know, it is a responsibility. So why might that be making things worse then?
So I agree. It's absolutely vital that people come to work well,
Mm-hmm.
but also that they leave work well. And very often people coming to work, not always well, but they're often coming to work well and they're leaving work unwell. And it's
Yeah.
absolutely vital that work creates no harm. We should never create any harm. So that is a human rights issue, and I'm all for it. My problem is that when we focus everything on well-being, we're at the wrong end of the scale. So we're actually thinking about it when it's too late, when strain has already turned into something more negative. And a lot of the concerns and the conversations around well-being are about the stuff that happens at the end so it's where people are already ill, or they're already going off sick, or
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at high levels of attrition. And that's it's good that you are aware of it, but it's actually too late. And the biggest problem I think organizations have, well, there are four big problems that organizations have. We've got a big piece of research we're just bringing out. And we've identified four problems. And one of those problems is it's really difficult to identify strain early because you can't see behind a brave face. And people are putting on brave faces. And that also relates back to how when you're in a situation where the stress is building and building and building, our bodies respond to that build of stress, but our minds start adapting to it. So our body is still feeling stressed, but our brain is saying, I'm getting used to it. I'm normalizing it. It's not so bad. It's okay. So when I come into work and I've got 500 emails, I don't go, what? 500 emails? That's ridiculous. I can't deal with this. We say, oh, well, that's a normal day. It's a
Mm-hmm.
normal day to go home feeling that you haven't achieved enough, or that you have been under surveillance because you haven't put in enough keystrokes, or whatever it is that might be going on that is adding to the pressure that you're feeling at work.
Yeah. So
Um,
in a way, are you suggesting that focusing on the well-being or the end result, the stress, we're sort of focusing on the outputs and the effects and the impacts rather than the causes thereof?
yes. And the thing that's really interesting about this is when you look at the data that we've got, we can see that the thing that makes a difference for people is, oh, you're going to be so surprised by this, Joe, is engagement. So
Oh,
when
well, there
people,
you
oh,
go.
what a surprise. So when people are really engaged in their work, they add the most value. And the thing is, it also has this knock-on effect that it actually makes me feel good. So I do a good day's work, I feel good about myself. So when I'm engaged, I actually have better levels of well-being. So if we look at the well-being and we don't look at the engagement, we're looking at the wrong end of the scale. We should be looking at what creates a great work environment and experience for people, not what is the outcome alone. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at it, but I'm just focusing on the outcome when it's not working is not actually helping us to make work something that is really working for everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
And
It's
that's where
it's
engagement.
interesting. Some years ago, I remember being at a presentation. I think it was Qualtrics, one of the big research companies.
Oh yes, I know him.
And they were talking about how you have to, though, and this is just perhaps another side to the coin from what you're talking about, that there is a risk that highly engaged employees are at a disproportionate risk of stress from burnout, at risk of burnout rather, because they are so highly engaged and they do love their work that they kind of don't stop. Have you ever come across that sort of finding?
That's really interesting, and I actually don't agree with it.
Okay, good. It's always nice to have a debate. Go on then.
So what they're talking about is not what I would call proper emotional engagement. That's transactional engagement.
Okay.
When I'm so engaged that I'm becoming a workaholic, that is not the same as being emotionally engaged in my organization. Emotional engagement is a different form of engagement. What I see a lot in, for example, law firms is highly, highly engaged lawyers. But they're transactionally engaged because they love the job that they do, they love their clients, but they don't love the organization they're working for. And if they got a better offer, they'd leave tomorrow. I know one law firm, I'm going to quote them, which is Withers, and I'm talking about the employment department because Elaine Arendt, who runs it, has really highly engaged people because they are there because they're doing something meaningful. They're supporting people who have got employment issues, not organizations, actually more the individual. They're doing something they feel really matters. So they're engaged in a very emotional way with the organization, with Elaine and what she's doing, with the purpose of it. And it's yes, it's stressful, but I'm doing something meaningful. And therefore I don't feel as likely to go into this kind of overdrive and this overworking, what's the word I want? Addiction to work, if you like, workaholism.
Yes.
So I think the key to it is that when you're looking at what does the profile look like of somebody who is really positively engaged, there are three things that you need to be able to look at. You need to be able to see all three at the same time. You need to be able to see what is their actual engagement level like in the organization. You need to see what is their well-being level like at the same time. So you can't measure one without the other. They need to be coherently measured. And thirdly, you need to see what is their cognitive capacity, and that is a function of the other two. So my ability for my brain to be able to function at its best is a combination of how engaged I feel with the organization and with the job I'm doing and the meaning of that work, and how well I'm feeling. So where I say I don't think we should be focusing on well-being alone, I think we need to have a more holistic look at it, and it needs to be more coherent the way that we're looking at it.
Right. So if just going back to where we started, which was I mentioned the health and safety executive, which you've cited. What kind of things have been happening with regards to them in high profile organizations? What have they been saying, and what have been their sort of penalties that they've been handing out? Or
well, first of all, I mean, there's an interesting case with Birmingham University. So they've been found against. And you can look, I don't want to quote the case because I don't want to get anything wrong, but I can tell you, and you can look it up and find it, but I can tell you what the essence of that is. And there's also been, I think, East Anglia Ambulance Trust has also had this kind of dealing with the HSE. And what's interesting is they have made a clear move from education to enforcement. And I think this is interesting because they've been around for a long time. They have the ability, and the management of stress in the workplace has been around as a guideline for a long time. And they have the ability, because they're already there and they already exist as the health and safety executive, to be able to enforce. So it's interesting that this doesn't require us to have any new passing of legislation. It's already there, effectively.
Okay.
But what they are doing is they're saying, right, we've had some complaints, we're going to come in and we're going to investigate you. Now, they're not going to the point of fining people yet, but what they are doing is saying, we're investigating you and we're going to charge you for the investigation. So you have to pay.
Okay.
And what's
Right.
interesting about what they've identified is where people have said we've got policies in place, they say we don't really care if they're not being acted on in a proactive way and a preventative way. So
Right.
you can have policies, that doesn't matter. You can have an EAP, for example, so an employee assistance program, they're not particularly interested in because they're saying, well, that's too late. It's after the fact. But when people are using an EAP, they're already harmed. What are you doing to prevent them from being harmed? So a lot of the things that organizations are putting into place and thinking this will tick the box, really interesting, because the HSC is saying, no, it doesn't, I'm afraid, because you have to be managing and monitoring risk.
Yeah, so this is too late, because by the time people are accessing or using these things you've put in place, the damage is already done, or the risk is already there. So so is this what you're talking about when when you talk about looking too far downstream, rather than addressing the upstream causes? And I love the way you talk about trying to pull people out of the river. That's what you mean by that then, yeah, Maria?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about the river of life, and the way I put it is that when you're crossing the bridge on the river, when you're feeling good, everything's fine, you feel like you're under some degree of control of your life. It's like crossing a bridge, and you can see all of the problems flowing underneath you, but you can rise above them. If you lose some level of well-being, some level of control, sometimes you're maybe under stress, under pressure, you can feel like you've dropped off the bridge and you're wading through water. It's difficult, you're okay, but it's hard work because it's like wading through water. But if things get worse, you can feel like you're up to your neck and you're trying to keep your head above water. And if it gets even worse beyond that, then it can be a matter of feeling like you're going under. Now, each of those different stages, as I like to call them, and they relate to the mental health continuum as well. As you think about these different levels, they need at each point, you need something different. One size doesn't fit all. So if I said to somebody who is going under, or even trying to keep their head above water, by the way, I've got an EAP, you can use it. It's a little bit like throwing a book to somebody on how to swim who's already drowning. So I use that because it really helps people to think, oh yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it? So when organizations have a whole range of well-being things that they can offer, and it's actually only useful when you're already on the bridge and you think that'd be interesting and I can benefit from that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but what I am saying is it's not solving your problem.
No.
It's great if everyone's well and they all use it and they keep well. I'm all for it, but you can't use it as a means of, sorting out the problem that you've already got. So yeah, you have to pull people out of the river, but we need to go upstream and prevent them from falling in.
Okay. So let's turn then to look at how we do that. And I think what I'd like to spend the rest of our time talking about is your latest book, The Cultural Imperative, because that is looking at what truly drives performance, well-being, and financial success. And I know in that book you talk about the 3 layers of culture within an organization. So are these what we need to know we have in place in order to prevent people getting into the river in the first place?
Absolutely. So
what are they, Maria?
I will tell you, Jo, by all means. So the cultural imperative is the senior leadership level of impact. So this is where culture is actually created, but usually unconsciously, not consciously. So the conscious behavior will very often be reflected in what's on the website and what is said, like, well, we want to be a culture of integrity, of high customer service, of caring for our people, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is that the real cultural imperative, what is actually driving culture, isn't what the senior teams say. It's what they measure, what they prioritize, and what they choose to act upon. And it's not even what they reward. It's those 3 things. my book, I talk about some pretty horrible examples where the cultural imperative is really clear. And when you look back on it, not at the time, but when you look back on it, and you can see how rail disasters in particular occurred as a result of this. And you can see it in the NHS as well. So when we have a really clear idea of what we want to measure from the senior team, and that is being passed down into the next layer of culture.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking, it's easy to use the NHS, sorry NHS, but, and I know they do have Department of Health pushing them as well, but if you imagine the trust saying, right, well, we want to reduce waiting times, that's really important. That is the measure. That
Mm-hmm.
measure is more important than you saying we believe in integrity and we believe in patient care and we believe in looking after our people. What will drive the culture is that measure, waiting times. It
Yeah.
becomes the most important thing. That will then be interpreted by what I call the cultural catalyst layer. These are the people that take what is being fed down from the top and make it happen. So they're the first line managers or the people in that middle management role. So
Mm-hmm.
they're interpreting and they're saying, this is how we have to do it. So they're only doing what is being fed down to them via the cultural imperative. And as I say, it isn't necessarily the organization saying, this is what our culture should be. Often it's completely the opposite of what they say they want their culture to be, but it drives real culture in real life. And that cultural catalyst layer then is influencing what happens, what I call it the cultural grounding. And the cultural grounding is the most important layer. It's the first line, it's the people that are actually doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones that actually create the culture. Even though it comes from above, they create it, and they create it as a result of the imperative that comes through. So if, for example, waiting times are the most important thing, and it's being fed to me, waiting times the most important thing, the way that we create culture will be to make sure we handle that. And when there are things that are challenging us, when there are trade-offs to be made, we won't make a trade-off which is against that imperative. That is the imperative that will drive us. So this is what leads people to do things that they would never normally do. They would never normally do things which are unethical. But if the driver is strong enough, they will be compelled to. So they might game the system so
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
can.
This is a bit like the Volkswagen diesel scam, isn't it?
I would imagine it probably is, because I would imagine that the cultural imperative was very clear from above it, but it might have been more conscious, to be perfectly honest.
Mm.
Because I would say for people like the NHS, they're not consciously trying to force people to make up the pull up the slack in waiting times by doing things a little bit naughtily and gaming. I don't think they mean for that to happen. It's an accidental, unwanted consequence of having that kind of metric be more important than anything else. And that's why I say it's very unconscious. Very often it's unconscious. You always have a cultural imperative in your business, always. It's just whether or not you're aware of it. And
Yeah.
the most important thing is bring it into your consciousness and then decide, is this really what we want? And think about what happens when there are trade-offs to be made. And is it really that we want people to focus on waiting times over and above patient care, for example? Because if you think, well, that isn't what we want, then you have to remember that you're creating that through your imperative. You have to think about, how do we change your imperative? Goodhart's law says, once a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And I think that is a very simple way for organizations to think about it. If our measure is becoming our target, it's wrong. We
Yeah.
mustn't be targeting things which actually are measures that we should be taking. We should be taking a measure, looking at waiting times as a measure, but we shouldn't be targeting it. We should be targeting good patient outcomes, patient satisfaction, for example, that kind of thing, rather than how quickly can we get people through the system.
Yes.
Because sometimes getting you through the system quickly does you a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's better to be in the system a little bit longer and actually get the cure. So
Yeah.
it's a different way of thinking. And when senior leaders are thinking about how they set a cultural imperative, they also need to be thinking about what that means in terms of their whole view of the organization and the environment they're sitting in, because it's a very difficult world that we're in at the moment. And we need to be able to look in a rounded way at what the environment is like outside us so that we can make positive, good quality decisions about how we run the organization on the inside. But that's a whole other thing. That's
a whole topic for a whole other show. So I mean, really, we should be being much more intentional about defining the kind of culture we want to have in our organizations that will enable us to deliver our organizational strategy and our objectives. You know, how do we need to behave? How do we need to interact with each other, with our leaders, with our people managers, with our customers, with our peers, our colleagues, in order to drive and deliver what we've identified as being those key organizational objectives? And so often they're separate from each other, aren't they?
Well, absolutely. And I think this is where human capital intelligence comes in. So I'm not particularly keen on the expression human capital because it sounds a bit dehumanizing. But when you talk about human capital, at least it gives you a language that puts it alongside and gives it the same importance as finance. Because in the world, as far as I'm concerned, people are more important than finance. But that's not how it's often looked at in organizations. We often
sadly not. No, it's not.
Right.
No, it's not.
And nobody really thinks that money is more important than people, apart from when it's in your own pay packet. But we don't really think that. But we need to have a language that helps us to have finance grade decision making that is related to people. Because at the moment, what we're doing is we're using all this wonderful finance data, and usually we've got fantastic quality data, but we don't have the same kind of data for people. And
so what do you mean by human capital intelligence then? What does that actually mean, Maria?
Right. Well, in very simple terms, so your human capital are the skills, the expertise, the abilities that your people, capabilities your people have. Human capital intelligence, to me, is the three things I mentioned earlier to kind of make it nice and round. So that's, you need to know what your wellbeing, engagement, and cognitive capacity is of your people, and you need to know it in real time. And that's also relevant to the HSE, because when you know that in real time, you can then take action that is relevant in the moment rather than having lag data, which means you're looking at absence, which means you're therefore looking at what happened in the past. So if you're looking at absence data or even engagement data is often last year's. Or
so human capital intelligence then is the insight, it's the data, it's the rigorous knowledge that enables you to really understand and make decisions. And who owns that?
So yes, and it has to be coherent. So it isn't three different pieces of data, it's data that comes together. And I'm really very, very keen on the idea that people should have their own data and should have access to their own data. So the way I think the best way for it to work is when people are able to see their own data, to see where they're at, and that managers, and this is really important for the HSE as well, managers need to have access to this data. Managers need to be able to see, without breach of confidentiality, what shape their team is in. They need to see if they've got a team that is engaged, or if they're struggling, that they're well and doing well and flourishing, or if they're having difficulties and they're feeling like they're going under. So if managers are given much more of the data to hand, they're in a much better place to be able to make the right decisions in the moment with their people. I think when it comes to engagement, community is so important, and engagement is the part of the picture that adds value to the business. Wellbeing doesn't have value, it detracts value, it takes value away if it's bad. So when wellbeing goes down, you lose value. But when engagement goes up, you gain value. That is your value creation engine. So your people need to be at their most engaged, and to be at their most engaged, they can be and will be well. And the thing in the middle is that cognitive capacity, the ability to be able to use my brain in the moment. So those three things, I think, are the important thing in terms of the intelligence that we need as a business. We need to have that in real time so that we can see it at a glance. And most important of all, our first line managers need to be equipped with understanding how to use that data, not to give them more work to do, because a lot of people are really overwhelmed at the moment, but more to give them real clarity on what is the right thing to do at the right time in the right way. And that, I think, is what is massively lacking. And I'm hearing everywhere we need to support our first line managers. Everywhere I'm hearing this.
Absolutely. It's the recurring thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Really? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Okay, Maria, we have run out of time. That has taken us right up to the wire. So brilliant wrap up at the end there. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. Good luck with the new book.
Thank you.
And all that really remains, excuse me, choking. All that really remains for me to say is to thank you for being our guest today, to thank our listeners for listening to Engage for Success Radio. Don't forget, you can download or stream any of the great shows from our archive at any time. And if you want to get involved in the movement, get in touch at engageforsuccess.org too. Sign up for our newsletter there as well, because our latest employee engagement survey and benchmark index of engagement in the UK, which is Maria has quite rightly said is the driver of organisational success and performance. Our latest 2026 report is going to be published very, very soon. So if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll be first in line to be able to get the top line results from that. So well worth doing. So thank you very much for listening. And Maria, thank you. Bye-bye now.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.